The Russian winter had settled over St. Petersburg like a possessive lover, wrapping the imperial palace in its cold embrace. Inside the grand winter palace, Countess Natalia Sokolova stood rigid as the ladies-in-waiting adjusted her gown for the evening's imperial reception. The white silk shimmered under the candlelight, nearly as pale as her complexion. "Straighten your shoulders, Natalia," her mother whispered harshly. "Remember what's at stake tonight." What was at stake was everything: their home, their reputation, their very survival. Since her father's death and the revelation of his gambling debts, the Sokolov family teetered on the precipice of ruin. The opulence surrounding her felt like a cruel joke. She didn't belong here among Russia's elite anymore. Soon, everyone would know it. Natalia nodded silently, lifting her chin. She had accepted her fate long ago. Love was a luxury reserved for heroines in the French novels she kept hidden in her bedchamber. For women of her station, even fallen ones, duty to family transcended personal desire. Tonight, she would secure a marriage proposal from Baron Petrov, a man 3 decades her senior with cold eyes that lingered too long on her figure. He could restore her family's standing and pay their debts. It was a small sacrifice compared to what would happen if she failed. "The Baron is watching," her mother hissed as they entered the glittering ballroom. "Smile, Natalia." She forced her lips upward as she glided across the polished floor. The orchestra played a lively polonaise, but to Natalia, it sounded like a funeral march. Through practiced eyes, she surveyed the room, noting the familiar hierarchy of Russian aristocracy. Grand dukes conversed near the Tsar's empty throne. Foreign diplomats clustered together, their accents floating above the music. And then, standing alone by the ice sculptures, was a man she had never seen before. Tall and imposing in his formal military uniform adorned with medals of the highest order, he stood apart from the usual sycophants. His face remained impassive, almost severe, with sharp cheekbones and penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with cool detachment. Unlike the other military men who laughed boisterously and competed for attention, he observed the proceedings with the stillness of a winter lake. "Who is that?" Natalia whispered to her cousin Alexandra. "Count William Thornfield," Alexandra replied. "The Tsar's new military advisor. English mother, Russian father. They say he was educated at Oxford before distinguishing himself in the Caucasus campaign. Half the court fears him, the other half seeks his favor." "And which half are you?" Alexandra smiled mysteriously. "Neither. I find him terribly dull. They call him the Winter Count, you know. Rumors say his heart froze after his wife died in childbirth 3 years ago." Natalia's attention was diverted as Baron Petrov approached, his cologne reaching her before he did. She steeled herself for his clammy touch on her gloved hand, but the expected interruption never came. Instead, a palace attendant in imperial livery appeared at her elbow. "Countess Sokolova," he said with a formal bow. "His Imperial Majesty requests your presence in the azure drawing room." "Immediately." The murmurs around her were immediate. A private audience with the Tsar was either the highest honor or the prelude to complete disgrace. Natalia's mother clutched her arm, her fingernails digging through the silk. "What have you done?" she whispered, panic-etching her features. "Nothing," Natalia replied, though her mind raced through possible transgressions. Had her father's debts to the crown been discovered? Were they to be stripped of their titles publicly? The azure drawing room was mercifully empty of courtiers when Natalia entered. Only the Tsar stood by the fireplace, his imposing figure silhouetted against the flames. To his right stood Count Thornfield, his expression unreadable. "Countess Sokolova," the Tsar's voice boomed in the nearly empty chamber. "We have been discussing your father's service to the Empire. And, of course, the unfortunate circumstances of his passing." Natalia sank into a deep curtsy, her heart hammering against her ribs. Your Imperial Majesty is most gracious to remember my father's humble service. Not so humble, Countess. Your father's diplomatic work in the Ottoman territory secured valuable intelligence. Intelligence that Count Thornfield has put to excellent use in our southern campaigns. Natalia remained silent, unsure where this conversation led. Her father had been a minor diplomat, not a spy. At least, not to her knowledge. The Tsar continued. It has come to our attention that your family faces financial difficulties. Heat flooded her cheeks. So it was public knowledge after all. The Empire rewards loyalty, Countess, and repays debts. The Tsar glanced at Count Thornfield. My advisor has proposed a solution that would honor your father's memory and secure your family's position. For the first time, Count Thornfield spoke, his Russian perfect but touched with the faintest English accent. Countess, I require a wife of suitable station and unquestionable loyalty to the Empire. Your father's service marks your family as devoted to Russia, despite your mother's French heritage. Natalia's mind struggled to comprehend his words. Was this a proposal? It sounded more like a military strategy. The Tsar has agreed to forgive your father's debts to the crown as part of the marriage settlement, Count Thornfield continued. Your mother and sisters would remain in your family estate, their position secured. The Tsar smiled, evidently pleased with himself. A fortuitous arrangement, is it not? The wedding will take place in 3 days, before Count Thornfield returns to his command. 3 days. Not even time to learn anything about the man she would pledge herself to for eternity. Natalia felt the room spin slightly. I am honored beyond words, Your Imperial Majesty, she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm grateful for Count Thornfield's generous offer. Then it is settled, the Tsar declared, clearly considering the matter resolved. You may thank the Count privately. I have other matters to attend to. When the Tsar departed, an uncomfortable silence fell between Natalia and her sudden fiancé. Count Thornfield made no move to approach her, instead studying her with that same clinical detachment. You seem surprised, Countess, he finally said. I had expected to be informed of my marriage before the rest of the Imperial court, she replied, finding her voice. This is not a love match, he stated flatly. I require a countess to manage my household and appear at official functions. You require financial salvation. The arrangement is practical for us both. How romantic, Natalia said before she could stop herself. The faintest flicker of something, perhaps surprise, crossed his features before disappearing. Romance is a luxury neither of us can afford, Countess. I spend most of my time with the Imperial Army. You will have considerable freedom to manage my estates and continue your social obligations. I ask only for loyalty and discretion. And children? The question escaped her lips unbidden. His expression hardened. If they come, they come. I have no expectations in that regard. The chill in his voice matched the winter frost creeping across the palace windows. This man truly was as cold as the rumors suggested. Yet Natalia found herself nodding. What choice did she have? Spinsterhood and poverty, or marriage to this frozen stranger who could save her family? I accept your terms, Count Thornfield, she said formally. And I will endeavor to be a wife worthy of your position. He nodded once, sharply. My secretary will call upon you tomorrow with the marriage contracts. Good evening, Countess. And just like that, Natalia's fate was sealed with neither a kiss nor even a proper goodbye. 3 days later, Natalia became Countess Thornfield in the Imperial Chapel, her wedding attended by the Tsar himself and the highest echelons of Russian aristocracy. Her husband remained as distant as during their first meeting, performing his role with mechanical precision. The only surprise came when he placed the wedding ring on her finger. For a moment, his hands trembled slightly, the only indication that he was flesh and blood rather than carved from Russian ice. That night, in his St. Petersburg townhouse, Count Thornfield showed her to her bedchamber, separate from his own, and bid her a formal good night. Before he could leave, Natalia gathered her courage. "My lord husband," she said softly, "is there anything you wish to tell me? Anything I should know about becoming the mistress of your household?" He paused at the door, his broad shoulders tense beneath his dressing gown. "My staff is efficient. They will guide you. I depart for the southern front tomorrow. I've left instructions with my steward regarding your allowance and duties. How long will you be gone?" 6 months. Perhaps longer. Half a year before she would even begin to know the man she had married. "I see. Then I wish you victory and safe return, my lord." Something in her words seemed to affect him. He turned slightly, though not enough to meet her eyes. "My first wife, Elizabeth, died in my bed giving birth to a son who did not survive. The physician said it would have been easier had she been alone." His voice was devoid of emotion. "I tell you this so you understand why certain arrangements in this marriage are as they are." Before Natalia could respond, he was gone, leaving her with the ghost of a woman she'd never met and the realization that her husband's heart hadn't merely frozen, it had been shattered. The months of Count Thornfield's absence stretched before Natalia like an endless Russian steppe. She threw herself into learning everything about her new position, the management of multiple estates, the intricate politics of her husband's affairs, the expectations of her role in his absence. His staff watched her warily at first, loyal to their master and his dead wife's memory. Only Mrs. Barton, the English housekeeper who had come with the Count from Oxford years ago, showed her any warmth. "He wasn't always this way, my lady," she confided one evening as she helped arrange Natalia's correspondence in the Count's study. "When he first married Lady Elizabeth, the house rang with laughter. He was devoted to her." Natalia ran her fingers over her husband's desk, meticulously organized and devoid of personal touches. "Did you know her well?" "Since she was a child." "Beautiful, fragile thing. Too delicate for Russian winters, I always said." Mrs. Barton sighed. "When she died, something in him died too. He threw himself into military campaigns, returning only when duty required it. And now he has a new wife he doesn't want," Natalia said quietly. Mrs. Barton's eyes softened. "Don't judge him too harshly, my lady. The Count is a man who feels deeply but has learned to hide it well." Those words stayed with Natalia as she settled into her role. She discovered her husband's study contained journals of his military campaigns, detailed, precise accounts written in a strong hand. Between tactical assessments were occasional observations of breathtaking sensitivity, descriptions of the quality of light over the Caucasus Mountains, notes on folk songs sung by Georgian villagers, sketches of wildflowers growing on battlefields. When the first letter from her husband arrived 3 months into his campaign, Natalia was surprised by its length. Rather than a terse inquiry about estate matters, he wrote detailed accounts of the southern territories, asked thoughtful questions about her management decisions, and even recommended books from his library that might interest her. Natalia responded with equal care, describing her reforms to the household accounts, her visits to the tenant farmers, and her observations of court politics. Almost as an afterthought, she included a pressed wildflower she'd found on the estate grounds, similar to one he'd sketched in his journal. His next letter arrived faster than the first, and enclosed was a dried blossom from the Georgian countryside with a simple note, "Your flower reminded me of these." They grow where one least expects life to flourish. Thus began a correspondence that grew increasingly personal. Through ink and paper, a connection formed that seemed impossible during their brief time together. Natalia found herself watching for his letters with an eagerness that surprised her. In his written words, Count Thornfield revealed a mind both philosophical and poetic, so at odds with his frozen exterior. "The men speak of going home to Russia with longing," he wrote in his 5th letter. "I find myself thinking of home differently now. Before, it was merely a place. Now, someone awaits there." Natalia read those lines repeatedly, wondering at their meaning. Was it possible that their arranged marriage might become something more? She dared not hope, yet found herself including more personal thoughts in her responses. "The Baroness Petrov commented yesterday that I seemed changed," she wrote. She meant it unkindly, implying a country countess cannot manage St. Petersburg society. I found I did not care for her opinion. Perhaps I am changing. I feel more myself managing your estates than I ever did navigating court intrigue. Spring was melting into summer when a messenger arrived with unexpected news. Count Thornfield was returning to St. Petersburg within the fortnight, months earlier than planned. The Tsar had recalled him for an urgent diplomatic mission. Natalia found herself in an unusual state of nervous anticipation. The household was set into motion preparing for the master's return. Rooms were aired, his favorite meals planned, his uniforms pressed. And Natalia spent hours considering how to greet this man who was her husband in name but had become something else entirely through their correspondence, neither a stranger nor quite a friend. When his carriage finally arrived, Natalia stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in a gown of deep blue that Mrs. Barton had assured her was his favorite color. The Count entered, taller than she remembered, his face more weathered from months in the field, but his posture still rigidly formal. "Welcome home, my lord," Natalia said, curtseying deeply. "Countess," he replied with a bow. When he straightened, something had changed in his expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps, or a slight uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "You look well. As do you, though perhaps tired from your journey." An awkward silence fell between them. How strange, Natalia thought, that they could share such thoughts on paper yet struggle to speak in person. "Your letters," he said abruptly. "They were most thoughtful." "As were yours," she replied, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. "Would you care for refreshment? Or perhaps you wish to rest after your journey?" "Actually," he said, his voice less certain than she'd ever heard it, "I thought perhaps you might show me the changes you've made to the East Garden. Your descriptions were quite vivid, but I find myself curious to see your work firsthand." It was the first personal request he had ever made of her. "I would be delighted," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. The garden tour stretched into dinner, and dinner into an evening of conversation that flowed more easily than either expected. "Count Thornfield, William, please, when we are private," he insisted, revealed glimpses of the man behind the letters. His dry wit emerged occasionally, along with a depth of knowledge on everything from botany to poetry. Yet always, a careful distance remained. He never touched her, even accidentally, and when conversation veered toward personal matters, he skillfully redirected. Late that evening, as they prepared to retire to their separate chambers, Natalia gathered her courage. "I've kept all your letters," she admitted. They were a comfort during the long winter. He stood very still, studying her face as if searching for something. "As were yours to me," he finally said. "More than I anticipated." Before she could respond, he bowed formally. "Good night, Countess. I have an audience with the Tsar tomorrow, but perhaps you would join me for dinner afterward. I find I have more to discuss with you than one evening permits." The diplomatic mission that had brought William home proved more complicated than expected. Days stretched into weeks as he shuttled between meetings with the Tsar's ministers and foreign dignitaries. Each evening, however, he returned to dine with Natalia, their conversations growing deeper, though that careful physical distance remained. Through these talks, Natalia learned the true nature of his mission. The Tsar was considering an alliance with the Ottoman Empire against shared enemies, a controversial move that required delicate negotiation. The Sultan's envoy arrives next week, William explained one evening as they sat in his study. The Tsar wishes us to host a reception for him. Us? Natalia asked, surprised. Yes. Given my military record in the Caucasus and your father's diplomatic experience in Constantinople, the Tsar feels we are uniquely positioned to make a favorable impression. He hesitated. It's an honor, but places significant pressure on us both. The success of this reception could influence the course of Russian foreign policy. Natalia nodded, understanding the weight of imperial expectations. I'll begin preparations immediately. My father often spoke of Ottoman customs. I believe I can arrange an evening that respects their traditions while showcasing Russian hospitality. William's expression softened. I've come to rely on your judgment in such matters. You've proven yourself most capable. The compliment, delivered in his customarily reserved manner, warmed her more than effusive praise from anyone else might have. The night of the Ottoman reception arrived amid swirling snow that transformed St. Petersburg into a fairy tale. Natalia had overseen every detail personally, from the menu featuring both Russian and Turkish delicacies to the careful seating arrangements that honored Ottoman hierarchies while maintaining Russian precedents. When the Sultan's envoy, Kemal Pasha, entered their home, Natalia surprised everyone by greeting him with a traditional Turkish welcome phrase. The Pasha's face transformed from diplomatic politeness to genuine pleasure. The Countess speaks our language, he asked William in French, the common diplomatic tongue. The Countess has many talents that continue to surprise even her husband, William replied with unmistakable pride in his voice. Throughout the evening, Natalia moved effortlessly between Russian aristocrats and Ottoman diplomats, smoothing cultural misunderstandings with graceful tact. She caught William watching her several times, an unreadable expression on his face. The reception proved a tremendous success. As the last guests departed, the Tsar himself clasped William's shoulder. Your Countess is a diplomatic treasure, Thornfield. Russia is fortunate to have her services. Alone at last, William poured them both a small glass of kvass and raised his in a toast. To my wife, whose intelligence and grace accomplished more tonight than a regiment of soldiers could. Natalia sipped the traditional drink, watching him over the rim. I merely did my duty to you and to Russia. No, he said quietly. It was far more than duty. I saw how you genuinely engaged with Kemal Pasha about his family, how you remembered details from my letters about Ottoman customs. That wasn't duty, that was genuine care. Something in his voice made her heart quicken. Perhaps I've come to care about the things that matter to you. William set down his glass and took a step toward her, the closest he had voluntarily come since their wedding. Natalia, he said, using her given name for the first time, I find myself increasingly grateful for the Tsar's arrangement of our marriage. Before she could respond, a palace messenger knocked urgently at the door. The diplomatic bubble around them burst as William was summoned immediately to the Winter Palace. The Tsar required his counsel on the Ottoman proposal, a late-night emergency session that could not wait until morning. When William returned hours later, the intimate moment had passed. The household was dark, and Natalia had retired to her chambers. On her nightstand, she found a single piece of paper in her husband's handwriting. What I wish to say tonight must wait, but know that my gratitude grows daily. Sleep well. The Ottoman negotiations intensified over the following weeks. William was frequently absent, returning home exhausted from diplomatic maneuvering. Yet even on the longest days, he sought out Natalia's company, if only for a brief conversation before retiring. One evening, he returned with unexpected news. The treaty is nearly complete. When it's signed next month, I am to be appointed ambassador to Constantinople. Natalia felt her heart sink. Constantinople? For how long? A minimum of 2 years, he replied, studying her reaction carefully. It is a significant honor. Of course, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. Congratulations, William. You've earned such recognition. He continued to watch her. The appointment includes accommodations for the ambassador's family. The Tsar specifically mentioned that your background would be invaluable in navigating Ottoman society. Natalia looked up sharply. You mean? I mean that I am expected to bring my wife, William said carefully. If she wishes to come. If she wishes. Natalia repeated, hardly daring to hope what his words implied. William took an uncharacteristic breath, as though steeling himself. When we married, I promised you freedom to manage my estates and continue your life here. I would not presume to demand you uproot yourself for my appointment. And if I wish to accompany my husband, she asked softly. Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she had glimpsed only in his letters. Then I would be. He hesitated, searching for the right word, most pleased. It wasn't a declaration of love, but from William Thornfield, it felt monumental. The careful distance he maintained seemed to narrow, though he still did not reach for her. I would need time to prepare the household for our absence, she said carefully. Mrs. Barton would oversee things here, of course. Of course, he echoed, relief evident in his voice. We would depart after the spring thaw. The Black Sea crossing is treacherous in winter. Their plans were interrupted the following day by an unexpected visitor. Princess Tatiana Belova arrived unannounced, sweeping into the drawing room where Natalia was reviewing household accounts. Countess Thornfield, she said without preamble, I've come to warn you. Natalia rose, confused by both the visit and the dramatic statement. The princess was known for her close connection to the Tsarina and her propensity for court gossip. Warn me about what, Your Highness? Your husband's appointment to Constantinople. Princess Tatiana removed her gloves with deliberate slowness. It seems congratulations are in order, but perhaps not for the reasons you think. Natalia maintained her composure with effort. I'm afraid I don't understand. No? Then let me be clear. The Tsar didn't choose your husband for his diplomatic skills alone. Constantinople is home to Madame Rousseau, your husband's French mistress before his first marriage. Everyone at court knows she fled there after his engagement to Elizabeth was announced. The princess watched Natalia's reaction with poorly disguised satisfaction. They say he's maintained correspondence with her all these years. Convenient that his diplomatic post takes him directly to her doorstep, isn't it? Natalia's mind raced. William had never mentioned any Madame Rousseau, yet his past before Elizabeth remained largely a mystery to her. Thank you for your concern, Princess, Natalia managed to say evenly. Though I wonder at your motives for sharing such information. Princess Tatiana smiled thinly. Consider it a courtesy between ladies. After all, you're still new to our court. So easy to be deceived when one marries in haste. She rose to leave. Oh, and the reception for the Ottoman delegation was quite impressive. Such a shame it will be your last significant contribution before being hidden away in Constantinople while your husband resumes old habits. After the princess departed, Natalia remained motionless, her mind in turmoil. Could it be true? William's emotional distance, his separate bedchamber, his years of military campaigns far from home, all could be explained by grief over Elizabeth, but might they also conceal ongoing affection for another? That evening, when William returned, Natalia found herself watching him with new eyes. Could this reserved, dutiful man be harboring secret passions? The thought seemed impossible, yet doubt had taken root. "You're quiet tonight," William observed over dinner. "Is something troubling you?" Natalia hesitated. Direct questioning seemed both impertinent and potentially humiliating. "I had a visitor today, Princess Tatiana." William's expression darkened slightly. The princess is an enthusiastic purveyor of court gossip. "Yes," Natalia agreed carefully. "She seemed eager to educate me about Constantinople." "Indeed? And what wisdom did she impart?" Natalia set down her fork. "She mentioned a Madame Rousseau, a Frenchwoman apparently well known to you." The silence that followed seemed eternal. William's face remained impassive, but Natalia noticed his hand tightening around his wine glass. "I see," he finally said. "And did the princess explain the nature of my acquaintance with this woman?" "She implied it was intimate," Natalia replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "And ongoing." William set his glass down with careful precision. "Isabelle Rousseau was my French tutor when I was 19. She was 10 years my senior and married to my father's business associate. We had a brief affair before my father discovered it and sent me to military school as punishment. I haven't communicated with her in over 15 years, and had no idea she resided in Constantinople." He spoke with such straightforward honesty that Natalia felt both relieved and embarrassed for doubting him. "I apologize for giving credence to gossip." "Don't," he said firmly. "The princess intended to create exactly this doubt between us. The question is why?" Natalia considered the princess's parting words. She seemed distressed that the Ottoman reception was successful. Perhaps she has her own ambitions regarding diplomatic appointments. William's expression shifted to one of respect. "Her husband has been lobbying for an ambassadorship." "Your insight is likely correct. Political marriages, diplomatic games, sometimes I wonder if genuine feeling can exist amid such calculations," Natalia said, half to herself. William regarded her thoughtfully. "When I married Elizabeth, I believed love could transcend such machinations. Her death taught me the danger of such vulnerability." He paused, his gaze softening. And yet?" Natalia prompted when he didn't continue. "And yet I find my certainties challenged of late," he admitted quietly. Before he could elaborate, their butler appeared with an urgent message. The Ottoman treaty signing had been moved forward. William was summoned to the palace immediately to prepare the final documents. Their conversation, once again, remained unfinished. That night, unable to sleep, Natalia wandered to William's study. Among his meticulously organized papers, she found a locked drawer in his desk. Under normal circumstances, she would never have considered violating his privacy, but Princess Tatiana's insinuations had planted seeds of doubt that rational thought couldn't fully dislodge. Using the household master key, she opened the drawer. Inside was a small wooden box containing letters, not from any Frenchwoman, but from Elizabeth. Alongside them was a miniature portrait of a beautiful, delicate-looking woman with a gentle smile, and a tiny baby shoe that had never been worn. And beneath these treasured mementos were Natalia's own letters, carefully preserved, some passages underlined, the very ones where she had been most personal, most vulnerable. In the margin of one, William had written a single word, hope. Ashamed of her intrusion and moved by this evidence of her husband's private heart, Natalia carefully returned everything and locked the drawer. Whatever William's feelings toward her might be developing into, they deserved to evolve without manipulation or suspicion. The following morning brought shocking news. The Ottoman envoy had been found dead in his diplomatic residence, apparently poisoned. Suspicion immediately fell on Russian conservatives opposed to the alliance. Within hours, the fragile diplomatic progress collapsed as Ottoman representatives prepared to return home, convinced of Russian treachery. William returned home briefly to collect documents, his face grave. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. The Tsar has ordered an immediate investigation, but the Ottomans are understandably suspicious. Could it have been natural causes? Natalia asked. William shook his head. The physician identified traces of a particular mushroom toxin in his tea. Someone with knowledge of Russian flora and access to the diplomatic quarters is responsible. Natalia frowned, a memory surfacing. At the reception, Princess Tatiana asked me about Turkish coffee customs. She seemed particularly interested in what the envoy preferred to drink. William's eye sharpened. Did she? That's potentially significant. The princess's family owns extensive woodland estates known for rare fungi. Surely she wouldn't risk war to prevent your appointment, Natalia said, though she remembered the malice in the princess's eyes. Perhaps not for that alone. But her husband's family has significant investments in armaments. A Russian-Ottoman conflict would profit them enormously. William hesitated, then made a decision. I need to share this with the Tsar immediately. The implications are grave. Accusing a family so close to the throne requires absolute certainty. What can I do? Natalia asked. Nothing at present. The palace will be in turmoil. Stay here where it's safe. But after William departed, Natalia found herself reviewing everything she knew. Princess Tatiana had arrived unannounced, ostensibly to spread gossip about Madame Rousseau. But what if that visit had another purpose? What if she needed to establish her presence away from the diplomatic quarter during the poisoning? On impulse, Natalia summoned the coachman who had driven the princess. Under the pretext of returning a glove the princess had forgotten, Natalia questioned him about his mistress's movements the previous day. Begging your pardon, Countess, but I didn't bring Her Highness directly from the palace, the coachman admitted. She had me wait almost an hour near the Ottoman embassy first. Said she was visiting a modiste nearby. This information was potentially damning, but without proof, it remained mere conjecture. Natalia debated what to do with this intelligence when Mrs. Barton interrupted with news that Kemal Pasha's personal servant was at the door, insisting on speaking with the Countess. The servant, a middle-aged Turk named Farid, bowed deeply when Natalia received him. Forgive this intrusion, Countess. My master spoke highly of your kindness before his passing. When I found this among his effects, I thought you should have it directly. He extended a small lacquered box. Inside was a miniature glass vial and a note in Kemal Pasha's handwriting. Should I fall suddenly ill, this contains the substance offered to me by Princess Tatiana. I accept her gift with suspicion, as her interest in our trade negotiations seemed forced. Natalia's hands trembled as she realized what she held. Farid, this is evidence of the greatest importance. Will you accompany me to the Winter Palace immediately? The Tsar himself must see this. The ensuing scandal rocked the imperial court. Princess Tatiana and her husband were arrested for treason and attempted sabotage of imperial foreign policy. The vial contained the same toxin found in Kemal Pasha's system, and a search of the princess's estate revealed a cultivation of the deadly mushrooms. With the true culprits identified, Ottoman-Russian relations cautiously resumed. The Tsar, grateful for Natalia's role in uncovering the plot, elevated William's position further. He would now serve as special envoy with extraordinary powers to rebuild the damaged alliance. When William finally returned home after days of crisis management, exhaustion lined his face. Natalia had waited up for him, despite the late hour. "You're a hero," he said simply, sinking into a chair by the fire. "The Tsar called you the savior of Russian foreign policy." "I merely followed the evidence," she demurred. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," William said firmly. "Most would have done nothing, fearing entanglement in court politics. You showed remarkable courage." Natalia poured him a glass of brandy. "I couldn't let suspicion fall on Russia when I had reason to believe otherwise. The alliance is too important." William accepted the glass, his fingers brushing hers in a rare moment of contact. "Is that the only reason?" She met his gaze steadily. "No. I also couldn't bear to see your work destroyed by such malice." "My work," he repeated softly. "Not our work." "Is it ours?" she asked. "Until recently, I wasn't certain what place I held in your life beyond a convenient arrangement." William set down his glass untouched and rose from his chair. For the first time since their marriage, he deliberately moved into her personal space. "I've been unfair to you," he said quietly. "When the Tsar proposed our marriage, I saw only a practical solution to several problems. I needed a wife of appropriate station, you needed financial security. It seemed adequately convenient for us both." He began pacing, his usual reserve cracking. "I never intended to develop genuine feelings. After Elizabeth died, I swore I would never again be vulnerable to such loss. Emotional distance seemed the only rational approach." "And now?" Natalia asked, hardly daring to breathe. William stopped his pacing and turned to face her. "Now I find that walls built to protect can also imprison. Your letters during my campaign, they reached me in ways I couldn't predict. Your intelligence, your compassion, your quiet strength. Without realizing it, I began to look forward to your words more than anything else." He took another step toward her. "When I returned and saw you in person, the woman whose mind had become so dear to me, I found myself struggling between habit and desire. The habit of distance versus the growing desire for connection." "Is that why you never touch me?" Natalia asked softly. "Even accidentally?" "Yes," he admitted. "Because I feared that once I began, I might not wish to stop." The confession hung between them, changing the atmosphere in the room. William looked at her with naked vulnerability, waiting for her response. "I opened your desk drawer," Natalia confessed suddenly. "After Princess Tatiana's visit. I found Elizabeth's letters, and mine." William stiffened slightly. "I see. I saw that you wrote hope beside one of my passages," she continued. "What did you hope for, William?" His expression softened. "That perhaps I had been given a second chance at something I thought forever lost to me. That the arrangement forced upon us by imperial politics might transform into something genuine." "And has it?" she whispered. Instead of answering with words, William finally, deliberately, reached for her hand. The touch was simple, his fingers curling around hers, yet after months of careful distance, it felt momentous. "I believe it has," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll permit it." Natalia stepped closer, eliminating the last of the physical distance between them. "I married a stranger to save my family," she said softly. "I never expected to find my heart's companion in the process." William's free hand rose to touch her cheek with reverent gentleness. "Natalia Thornfield," he said, using her married name for the first time with warmth rather than formality, "I find myself hopelessly in love with my wife. An outcome I never anticipated when the Tsar arranged our match. As I find myself in love with my husband, she replied, her heart full. Perhaps imperial arrangements sometimes get something right after all. When he finally kissed her, it was with the pent-up passion of months of restraint. All the emotion he had channeled into letters now flowed freely between them, transforming what had been a marriage of convenience into one of profound connection. Later that night, as moonlight spilled through the windows of what was now their shared bedchamber, William traced the contour of Natalia's shoulder with wondering fingers. "I've been offered a new diplomatic posting," he murmured. "The Tsar wishes me to establish a permanent embassy in Constantinople. After your role in uncovering Princess Tatiana's plot, he specifically requested that you accompany me as official diplomatic hostess." Natalia turned to face him. "And do you wish to accept?" "Only if you truly desire it," he said. "I've learned that imperial demands mean nothing compared to your happiness." She smiled, placing her hand over his heart. "My happiness is no longer separate from yours. Constantinople, St. Petersburg, or the farthest reaches of the empire, I care only that we face it together." William gathered her closer. "Then together it shall be. No more separation. No more distance. No more frozen hearts," Natalia whispered. "No," he agreed, kissing her with newfound tenderness. "Only warmth from now on." The following spring, as the ice broke on the Neva River, Count and Countess Thornfield departed St. Petersburg for Constantinople. Court gossips noted the remarkable transformation in the once cold Count, who now rarely left his wife's side and whose face had softened into something approaching contentment. The Tsar himself came to bid them farewell, kissing Natalia's hand with unusual deference. "Russia owes you a debt, Countess Thornfield. Few arranged marriages served the empire so well. It wasn't duty to empire that transformed our union, Your Majesty," Natalia replied with a smile toward her husband. "But perhaps that's a diplomatic secret best kept between a countess and her count." As their ship sailed toward the Black Sea and their new life together, William wrapped his arm around Natalia's waist, holding her against the Baltic wind. "I once told you that romance was a luxury neither of us could afford," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "I've never been more pleased to be proven wrong." Natalia leaned into his embrace, thinking of how far they had come, from a marriage of strangers to a union of hearts. "Some luxuries," she replied, "are worth every cost." Above them, Russian eagles soared against the vast sky, their wings catching the spring sunlight, free and unbound, just as the hearts that once lay frozen had thawed into something beautiful and warm at last.